Hey, Chicago. What do you say? Cubs gonna win today.
Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time for the Baseball Podcast with National Baseball writer David Brown. David, how are things going with you?
Andy, I couldn't be better. Well, maybe a little bit, but I'm just, for the sake of the podcast, for the people out there, I'm aces.
Oh, that's great. It's great to hear. We're all very excited. So I want to talk to you about not only about the debut of last year's number 1 overall picks, Paul Skenes, but a little bit about what the Pirates did with him earlier, in preparation for for his first start.
Yeah.
And what we think their plan is going forward with him. He didn't make the team out of spring training, even though at worst he would have been their second best pitcher from the very first day of the season. And they sent him to AAA, where he humiliated everyone that he faced, but they didn't let him pitch more than 4 innings in any one start. So is that just how they're going to treat him, we think? Or is it, we got X amount of innings that we're going to have you pitch this year, and we want you to pitch most of them for us. So we'll shorten up your starts in the minors before you get here.
With pitching, I feel less confident in my opinions than I do on hitting, and but I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I know pitchers in college, they pitched once a week, but you are never more abused. The only place that abuses pitchers more than college is high school. If something bad has happened to Paul Skenes' elbow, it's already happened. It's not going to happen with the Pirates. I don't know. It didn't. Somebody had the opinion that, why did they send him to the minors at all? Like, first of all, whatever you think how many innings he should have or how many bullets he has in his arm or whatever, just use him for the Pirates. I mean, if you look at that lineup, you mentioned how Skenes would be like no worse than Jared Jones, 1A, whatever. But they don't have much of an offense. They're not going to be competing. Just bring him up and use him however you want, I guess. But on the Pirates, you said humiliating. That was perfect. There was no use for him being in AAA. There was nothing. And 4 innings a pop. I don't understand. I don't get it. I need, maybe if maybe you can help me figure it out, because I don't get it.
To illustrate this point, he faced 105 pitchers batters at AAA Indianapolis, and he struck out 45 of them. What happened to the other 60 at plate appearances, Paul?
I'll do better next time.
He gave up 17 hits at 27 innings, an ERA of .99.
If I can do a tangent for a second, a related tangent. You know how like you have moments in your life that you regret like 30 years later, and they're like little things that shouldn't come up. We used to play like baseball in the backyard, like not even lob league. It might have been wiffle ball or tennis ball or whatever. And we had this kid who was a little bigger than everybody else, but he just swung the crap out of the ball. His name was Jose Barajas. And at some point, like every time he'd come up, he'd hit a home run. At some point, us kids, like, and I don't know if this was my idea or I just went along with it, didn't let Jose play anymore because he just kicked our ass so much. And he got really upset. I remember him crying. And he was like, a year older than me. It was kind of bizarre. And I still have some kind of psychological trauma about this moment, not letting Jose play. They should not have let Paul Skenes do that to those poor boys in AAA. It was not fair.
Yeah, I think the International League Commissioner forced the Pirates to promote Paul for the good of the game, for the competitive balance of AAA. Well, to your other point, he pitched. So he started his career. He went to the Air Force. He was going to be a fighter pilot and a pitcher.
I don't understand that either, but okay. And
he pitched 2 seasons there. As a freshman, he only pitched 26 innings. As a sophomore, he pitched in 85. Then he transferred to LSU, where the biggest change he made was, he struck out more guys than he had. He was still striking out 10 per 9 at the Air Force. When he got to LSU, he started striking out 15 per 9, but he stopped walking anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so he completely dominated the SEC and the College World Series. But he pitched 122 innings as a junior, and basically pitching once a week until he got to the College World Series. And so he was routinely throwing 100, 110 pitches a start, and that's what he's trained to do.
Right.
And then the Pirates get their hot little hands on him. And he did pitch a little bit in the minors last year, but only 5 starts. And then they get him this year, and they're like, okay, how about 50 pitches a game? It's like taking a marathon runner and saying, okay, all we're gonna do, we're just gonna have you run the 800 meters for a while, but then there's gonna be a marathon coming up, and you're just gonna have to run a marathon again.
Right.
So clearly their plan has to be, and he only pitched 5 innings against the Cubs. 4 against that vaunted Cub lineup in his debut. He's going to be a 5-inning pitcher, I think, for the year.
Right.
And I'm with you. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, do we blame all this on Tom Verducci and the math he would do? He would look at, in the 90s, he would look at every pitcher who got hurt, and he would go, young pitcher who got hurt, and he would look back, and he would blame it on the innings increase from one year to the next. Yeah. And I always thought that argument didn't hold any water, because every young pitcher, their innings were a good young pitcher, their innings were going to go up. And whether they got hurt or not, you could always blame the injury on the increase in innings.
Yeah, but
because
not all
there
of
were
them
guys
got
who
hurt.
didn't get hurt who had the same increase. So
Right.
what explained that, Tommy?
No, I agree. I think you look at, and I kind of cringe when olds complain about, we're babying the pitchers, and I don't know if they're babying them. I just don't know how this helps, because you look at Tommy Johns and they seem to be going up. But also, we've kind of been in a mode, at least since the Verducci times, where we've been aware of innings and how that possibly might have something to do with injuries. And I'm not sure if we've ever tied it together with actual data and fact. And the only thing we keep coming back to, why are people getting hurt? It's because they throw too hard. It comes back to that more than the amount of innings that we put on them. We're very conscious of not having pitchers throw more than 100 or 100, when they're tired. Fatigue is, that's something I think. But he's not anywhere close to fatigued when he's throwing 4 or 5 innings.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% confident that I know. I mean, Jeff Passan even wrote a book.
Yep.
He's a smarter, better reporter than me, and he wrote a book about the arm. Did that solve any of the riddles? No. We have more people getting injured than ever. So I don't get it. I don't understand why. It's like those innings with LSU never happened. He never threw 110 pitches or 120 innings or whatever. I mean, it's just,
you're not building him up from 50 innings to this. You're building him up from 100. So if you figure what a logical increase might be, 40 or 50 innings from one year to the next, 170 innings was going to get him through most of the season, pitching him just normally.
Right. And I know it is a little different because of the 7 days off or the 6 days off.
Yeah.
So you do have to factor that. But I think we are making an overcorrection on that. And he's only going to get so many, I hope he never gets hurt. Like Chapman throws that hard and has never gotten hurt, but he's 1 in a million. So you have to imagine that it's probably going to happen at some point. But I don't know that they are doing anything to prevent that from happening someday.
I mean, I'm not asking for the Pirates to do to treat Paul like Dusty treated Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood, and Carlos Sobrano in 2003. You don't want him throwing 130 pitches every 5 days.
You don't want to wave the white towel.
But this is 180 in the other direction.
Right.
This is, at some point, even a great pitcher is going to have to learn how to execute pitches when he's tired later in a game. And if you don't ever get him to that, you wait 3 years to get him to that point, he's that much farther behind where he should be. As somebody whose favorite team plays in that division, I'm fine with him only pitching 4 innings against the Cubs.
Right.
I'd like him to pitch more innings, though, against the Brewers and the Cardinals. I think that should be the deal. So you take it easy on the Cubs, and he'll go after everybody else. His first ever outing was an interesting one, given that he pitched really well, and he ends up with a 6.75 ERA after one outing. Because the guy who came in, he left with 2 on, and the guy who came in to relieve him walked at one point through 16 of 17 pitches for balls. So Skenes both inherited runners scored. They were walked in.
Right.
It was literally Rick Vaughn, and
It sounds like Dave Brown Little League. Actually, my second year in Little League, they made me pitch, and it was.
How can they lay off pitches this close? But he certainly passed the eye test. I mean, even with the bad mustache.
Why is it that all mustaches look bad now? Like, I've never really liked mustaches, but if you remember people from the 70s, it's like, all right, well, that makes sense. He's got a mustache, whatever.
Yeah, well, not everybody's Tom Selleck.
Yeah.
If you got a weird face, a weird mustache isn't going to make it better. Although Paul has a very attractive, famous girlfriend who seems to think he's attractive. So who am I to make fun of his creepy mustache?
Is that gymnast Olivia? Is it Olivia Dunn?
Yes, Livy Dunn thinks the mustache looks okay. Yeah, I'm not shaving it either if I'm Paul Skenes.
Sure.
Funny. But seeing him, he's not really unleashed, just kind of tepidly released into the wild. And the Cubs subsequently having terrible bullpen issues immediately made me think, hey, they've got one of those guys. Their number 1 pick from 2 years ago, Cade Horton, was doing to Double-A what Paul was doing to Triple-A. And he got promoted to Iowa. He pitched well in his first start, not so well in his second. Although he gave up 6 runs in 3 innings, but he struck out 5, didn't walk anybody, didn't give up a home run. So I didn't see the game, but I assume everybody just kept hitting the ball to David Bodie. And, It's like, how did that go through your legs again? For God's sakes. Cade will similarly be on a pitch limitation, an innings limitation. In fact, he's on the same one. His AA starts, he never got to the fifth inning in any of them, even though he was dominating. He's a little bit different given that he didn't pitch 122 innings his senior year or his junior year at Oklahoma. He pitched 53.
Mm-hmm.
So he is building up from a much lower number. It appears, based on how they've been using him so far, that the Cubs want to keep him at between 100 and 120 innings this year, which I think is fine. I just think he's already pitched 20. I figure if he's going to say you're going to hold him to 100, I think the next 80 should all be in Chicago pitching out of the Cubs bullpen.
Well, I agree. Similar level, especially if he doesn't have. I don't know if he doesn't have nothing to prove. Like Skenes doesn't have nothing to prove in AAA, but if we are going to go all out and be worried about injuries, if you think the guy isn't going to pee his pants, bring him up. If he's close to being ready, good enough.
Honestly, if he pees his pants, you just blame it on the Fanatics' pants. Oh, look at this. It makes it look like I peed my pants. These pants are dyed so bad. You did
call it
pee your
out
pants.
even.
What was the brown stain?
We weren't going to ask you about that.
Yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's just a cover. It's not just Carlos Rodon's flop sweat coming through the jersey top. Maybe there's guys actually whizzing themselves. That's why the pants are a different shade of gray than the tops, because they're wet.
I think, too, this is another side tangent, but this is an opportunity with Dune being popular in the popular culture again. Let's have some still suit action where we plug in and we save our urine, if you will.
And you could give pitchers one timeout an inning where they could put the straw in their mouth and drink it. Get rehydrated. That would help. It's funny that this is happening to Nike. When Nike first took over the NFL jersey contract, there were certain teams, when they made the pants for the first year, there were certain teams, the Cowboys, I know, were one of them with their silver pants, that as soon as players started sweating, they all looked like they pissed their pants.
Right.
It's like immediately. Within, 5 minutes after kickoff, the whole offensive line looks like it was out there just whizzing away right in their pants.
There were clues that this was going to be an issue.
And I talked about this on the Cub Pod last week, but I'm not asking for the Cubs to make Cade Horton their closer. I don't expect him to come in and be K-Rod. But you don't have enough pitchers for your bullpen. You get Colton Brewer pitching. You're trading for Tyson Miller. You're looking for anything. Jose Cuas is back again. He was up. He was bad. He went down. He came back up. He was up for a day. He went back down. He's back again.
Right.
And it goes back to what you were saying about Skenes. If he's going to get hurt, isn't he just as likely to get hurt in Des Moines as he is in Chicago? And wouldn't
or just sooner or later somewhere, and it just doesn't matter. Why waste? I hate the metaphor bullets, but
yeah.
Why waste them? Why?
So we're in agreement. I'll talk to Jed. It's time to call Cade up.
Right.
Get him up there.
I'm sure it will happen then. If we're in the quorum, so 2 out of 3.
Boog Sciambi had when he saw that the Cubs had David Peralta at AAA, and David opted out of his deal because just too big of a logjam on the Cubs outfield for him to crack it with Ian Happ.
I don't want no part of that.
Slugging 310. There was no way Peralta could get any. Not only is Ian Happ slugging 310 on the season, from his good side, when he bats left-handed, 298. That's what he's slugging. 298. But Peralta opted out.
And Bunny Tenders, neither of them can hit.
Yeah.
They get the big money and they're done.
Yep. Boog was clearly thinking out loud right on the broadcast. Miguel Amaya was batting, and Miguel switched numbers from 6 to 9 in spring training so that Peralta could have it, which I thought was funny. You don't give your number to a non-roster invitee unless he actually makes the team. Like, don't worry about what number he's got unless he makes it. And he was wondering if he was going to switch back, which made me think, because Cade Horton likes to wear number 9. So if I'm Miguel, I'm hanging on to that, and I'm selling it to the rookie when he comes up.
Right.
Hey, you want your number? He doesn't have to know that you can just switch back to your preferred number. Get a little signing bonus out of him.
I did not know that Cade was one of those single-digit pitchers, one of those.
Yeah, he has been. I don't know what number he's wearing at Iowa. 104? I don't know what.
Hey, so, I kind of got us off topic a little bit. Would you bring him in relief, or would you start him for the Skenes 4 innings?
Well, I guess I'll ask you this. People talk about how, what if he gets hurt trying to get himself loosened up in the bullpen because he's a starter. He doesn't know how to. How hard is it to learn how to warm up?
Don't ask the White Sox that
Some
question.
of the dumbest players in Cubs history were relief pitchers, and they managed to get warmed up. I mean, the Kyle Farnsworth got warmed up. Roberto Novoa got warmed up. I made a joke last week about Justin Grimm, the guy who famously, as the team was running onto the field to celebrate Jake Arrieta's no-hitter in Dodger Stadium, had no idea what they were celebrating. He knew how to warm up. He didn't blow out his arm. And the other thing with the Cubs is, given the fact that they've got a lot of pitchers on short leashes, like Kyle Hendricks is back, hopefully for good, but you're not going to get a lot of innings out of him. If Jordan Wicks comes back, he wasn't making it out of he hadn't made it out of the 5th inning, and then I guess he did in the start that he got hurt in. You've got ample time to just literally plan for Cade. He's like, all right, if they're going to go at most 5, you're going to pitch a couple innings today. And you start warming him up in the 4th inning if he needs the full warm-up.
Right.
I would pitch him out of the bullpen, is what although given their rotation, certainly their spot will open. They can just have him start. But Hayden Wesneski right now is kind of in that start when you need it and then long relief when we don't. I don't know why you couldn't do the same thing with Cade.
And this has been, you mentioned how smart players are or whatever to get them warmed up. This is something that pitchers used to do all the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't get really hurt doing it, warming up on the spot. Maybe they can't go in like immediately, so it can't be like urgent, but it doesn't take that long to warm up.
In the good old days, that's young pitchers started in the bullpen. You worked your way, you pitched in the bullpen and you earned a starting spot at some point, no matter how good.
That makes a lot more sense to me than having a guy waste away at AAA for these half games or third games. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I keep going back in my head to like John Smiley, who was a good pitcher, a starting pitcher with the Pirates in the 80s and 90s. His first season or two was in the bullpen. Yep. He was a 1-inning left-handed relief pitcher, and that's how they eased him into it. Let's do that. I mean, that makes more sense.
Yeah, the example I gave was Chris Sale, who for the first 2 seasons was just a relief pitcher, and then they made a starter out of him. And I looked it up, in the first 7 years that he pitched as a starter, he finished in the top 5 in Cy Young voting. And they did it with him because when you looked at him, Skeletor, they're like, ooh, we're going to have to slowly ramp this guy up.
Is he okay?
His elbow is going to go flying into the stands at some point. Which it did anyway, but it took a long time. And then you almost wonder, he came out of the bullpen to save a World Series for the Red Sox. And part of that was he knew how to do it. He'd already done it before.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, it's decided. Just going to get
okay.
I'm just going to tell Jed it's time for Cade.
I look forward to our the fruits of our labor.
If he needs me to swing out to central western Iowa and pick him up, I'll go do it. That's fine.
That sounds awful.
It does. In Iowa, you drive until you hit the tree, and then turn left and go to a state with topography. So I was also wanted to ask you, with the Cubs bullpen falling apart relatively early in the season due to injuries and general badness, and then Adbert Alzolay is kind of a combination of the two, where he's pitching really poorly, he doesn't have any options left, and suddenly it's like, oh, my arm, I think it's broken. How can you fix a bullpen in May? Because teams that have good bullpen pieces aren't trading them in May.
Yeah, good. There's a couple different kinds of good. The Cubs, as we mentioned, maybe off the air, have just brought in Tyson Miller, and there are guys like that come up and they're out of options and they pitch well, and then there's like a roster crunch. You just have to have good scouting and keep an eye on the designated for assignment list and go, hey, maybe that guy's something. and try and, I mean, that's how you piece things together until the trade market opens up more. And so, I mean, that's one way, and that's not, there's no guarantees there. And there's also, it's inconsistent. Like sometimes there won't be anybody like that for a couple of weeks, but that's what you have to do.
It's basically the in-season version of what Jed, this first few years as GM, did in the off-season, which was he was bringing in like 3 or 4 veteran relievers, hoping that 1 or 2 of them would stick. And he had pretty good success with it. They flipped a bunch of guys. And that was why they had David Robertson to trade for Ben Brown. It's why they had, there's a mess of them that I can't even think of at the top of my head. Chris Martin and the rest of Coldplay. And anyway, he had guys like that. But this year he didn't do it. He 1-for-1 replaced people. He replaced Michael Fulmer with Hector Neris. And he didn't go for any bulk. And I'm sure he'll tell you, well, our 40-man is so much more. We got more prospects on the 40-man than we used to, and I don't have spots for those guys. But a lot of those guys come in on their non-roster invitees anyway. You don't worry about putting them on unless they make it. And so now he's got to kind of do that on the fly during the season when the shop, you have to be a lot better at it because you're shopping. The number of people available is far smaller. Like former Cub 4th round draft pick Tyson Miller, who pitched 5 innings for them in 2020, and I have no recollection of any of that. I don't know if he does or not, but he's well traveled, if nothing else. He's pitched for the Cubs, the Rangers, the Brewers, where he pitched for Craig Counsell. I don't know if Craig remembers him. He pitched in 7 games. Pitched for the Dodgers and the Mets, and then the 9 games he pitched this year for the Mariners is the most he's ever pitched for one team in one season.
I swear I didn't do anything. Yeah, so the most he's ever pitched for one team. Well,
and he was fine.
Sure.
He struck out 12 and 11 2/3 innings. He only walked 1, gave up 8 hits. So he's automatically the Cubs' best relief pitcher the minute he shows up. The other thing that the evolution of the way they use pitchers now that I think needs to be addressed is the win rule. Now, I know teams don't care about starting pitcher wins and all that stuff, and I don't really either. Except to me, it's always been weird, and now it's especially weird. And I know this because I was an official scorer for a year. If the starting pitcher doesn't go 5 innings, then you give the win to the most effective pitcher. What you deem as the official scorer, they give you the power as the most effective pitcher for that team, but you can't pick the starter. He's disqualified. And to me, that's what they should change. They should just go back to if you think the starter was the most effective pitcher in that game, you can give him the win. You don't have to, which right now, if he limps through the 5th, say he gives up 8 runs in 5 innings, and that team wins 9-8, he gets the win no matter what, even if he's the worst pitcher for that team. So I just feel like the easy fix for that is to just make it so the scorer can pick the starter if he wants.
There's no reason not to do that. Now, the right thing to do is just to not have it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to do that. And I think teams will care to a certain extent about who gets the win just because, A, it might come up in arbitration and they are just mindful of not wanting to take that away from the pitcher. If, I would have got the win, but, they're trying to rig the game against me and, I don't know, something like that. And also, it's like a neat little, you got the win today kind of a thing. It's just one of those little things that get you through the season, little incentives. So when possible, I think maybe it does come into play. But I like your idea. I do think maybe if we can sort of steer things away from giving wins to individuals, maybe we should do that because, to me, most games are clearly won by the group rather than one person. So one way or another. So
especially now. And then now we get to we've already had one. You get to the it very rarely now. Not that no hitters were real common, but it's getting one guy actually pitching all 9 innings in a no hitter is going to be increasingly rare.
Right.
And I just know in fact I saw it. Who just threw one? God, I can't even think of it.
Not Ronel Blanco?
No, didn't we just have a team no hitter?
The Braves lost it.
Oh, that's right. The Braves lost it.
Yeah.
That's right. And Reisel Iglesias didn't know. They asked him if he knew when he came in, and he was non-committal to whether he knew it or not. Now, it always used to be, if I was watching a game and the little no-hitter alert popped up, I would flip over to MLB Network to watch it end.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, if I see that it's a combined no-hitter, I don't even bother to change the channel.
It's it's interesting if it's your team.
Yeah.
Like, if you root for that team or have some kind of interest like that, that makes sense. But as just unless you got guys on your fantasy team or it has never been even, it's somewhat interesting, but it's not anything that I care to make an extra effort.
I can tell you, as a Cub fan, the combined no-hitter was the last gasp of the 2016 era Cubs.
Yeah.
In 2021, they threw a combined no-hitter at Dodger Stadium, and then I think they lost 10 of the next 11 games, and the sell-off was on.
And they broke it up.
And it was all because of that no-hitter, that fake no-hitter. If Justin Grimm had still been around and he didn't celebrate, didn't know what they were celebrating that time, I would not have blamed him at all.
Well, I think Kimbrel said he didn't know.
Yeah.
So that I thought of that when you were talking.
Knew there was a shutout. He didn't know it was a
right. Well, I'm glad he knew that much, but
maybe he didn't even know that. I didn't know we won until the catcher popped up. Got all excited.
Oh, we're jumping around. Oh, we won, huh? Yeah, we're ahead. Yeah. So, and the old person in me who's seen his share of no hitters on TV or whatever, I'd like for that to come back somehow. I don't know how we get there, but it would be nice to have complete games in play again, and then as a result, also no hitters. But right now, very difficult to do it.
Yeah, and I think while we're changing official rules for official scores, and I know Jim Deshaies from Cub TV and Len Casper, former Cub TV, who now I don't know what he does. He sells caskets at a mortuary. They also advocated for a team error.
Yeah.
When you can't, when basically for things like the ball falling between 3 guys and nobody bothered to catch it, that would get rid of the guy lost the ball in the lights and it's a double because you don't have to give it to the guy who lost it in the lights, but it goes down as an error. So we should probably fix that.
I'm nodding my head for those people who are listening, which would be all of you. I'm agreeing.
Now they did, and this is not an official score thing, but they did change the interpretation of this drove Deshaies nuts, and he wasn't alone. The fact that when you run to first base, you have to go into fair territory at the end to hit the bag, because the bag is fair, even though your running lane is in foul territory. They have changed that rule now where when you get to the end, if the ball hits you just before you get to the bag, it's not runner interference because they're acknowledging you have to do that to get to the bag. I just think it's weird. I know it would make the field look strange. That's why they don't want to do it. But I really feel like the safety base should just go in. And the
only bad part about that is something that almost never happens.
Yeah.
If you hit the base, it's fair.
Yeah.
So you can't really have that. And what we need is like a James Bond type device where
it just comes out.
Yeah. It raises out of the dirt. And then, after the ball is, it has to be after the ball is hit. I don't know how the hell you do it.
Yeah. Well, if Vince Coleman was still around, he would get caught in that thing. Don't they do it? And I'm not going to act like we need to get Beth Mowens on to talk about softball. But don't they paint the foul part of the bag orange?
They do. So if it hits the orange part,
and now it's another judgment call for the umps who are already screwing stuff up. But that one I would think should be relatively easy to review because you should be able to see the white ball hitting the orange part of the base.
What about
like you said? How often does it happen? How often does a ball hit a bag?
5 times a year. I don't know.
Right. twice a month in the entire league, probably.
Right.
I mean, if you watch Naked Gun, more outfielders are getting hit by cars trying to catch balls than balls are hitting the bag. So I was listening today to Pablo Torres' podcast, Pablo Torres Finds Out, and Boog Sciambi was on the podcast, and what they were trying to find out was, ironically, if Tom Brady is going to be any good as an announcer. And so the reason Boog was on is he's Pablo's friend, he's Dan Labatard's friend from his time in Miami.
Okay,
but just the idea that the mechanics, you can know your sport inside and out. The mechanics of a broadcast, though, don't make it easy for everybody to get out what the information they need to get out at the right time. And that's really what they were on for. But they talked about all kinds of stuff. But Pablo apparently sat in for an entire game at Citi Field a couple of weeks ago and watched Boog and Jim work. And one of the things he was talking about with Boog was how, Jim, for a long retired major league pitcher, is very analytical, or at least analytical. And Boog said he's more curious than anything. Like the reason he's open to it is Jim likes to find new approaches to things. That's why he doesn't just scoff at all the new advanced stats.
Right.
And I got Pablo to ask, are there things that fans think are important, stats that fans think are important, that baseball teams have no regard for? And Boog said, like the pitcher win. Teams don't care how many wins an individual pitcher has. He didn't say batting average, but then he kind of did in a different part of his answer. And he said RBI, and then he told a story that he's told on the broadcast before. Him and Jim were talking during a game about that very thing, and about how our teams really don't care about RBIs. And so during the game, Boog texted Jed and asked him, he goes, without looking, what player leads the Cubs in RBI? And Jed guessed, and he was wrong. And Boog made fun of him. So then Jed asked Carter Hawkins, and Carter guessed, and he was wrong. And then he asked Jared Banner, whoever the other guy is asking, he didn't know. And I thought, honestly, by the time you got to the third person in the Cub front office, maybe they're just morons. Maybe it's not that they don't value RBI. They just have no idea what's going on with their own team. Because one of them's like David Descalso. It's like he hasn't played on a team for 5 years, and he drove in like 8 runs in 3 years. But one thing that I was enjoying it, and he talked. One of the things, the stupid thing that I enjoyed, he was talking about was Boog is the voice of MLB The Show, him and Chris Singleton, and he talked about recording and Chris Fowler has talked about this with the NCAA football game coming back out this time, how many ridiculous things you have to record just in case it happens in the game. So I talked about that. But one of the things Boog talked about was, he's like, well, with teams, when they're looking at a hitter, all they're really interested in is how often the guy gets on base and if he slugs or not, because those are the indicators of a really good hitter. And that's what the Cubs are focused on. And I was driving at the time, and I tried to stay. I had the urge to just drive like off the road and just find a pole and crash into it, because the Cubs have a guy who Boog talks about like he's the greatest player on the team, or the most underrated player on the team. He has all this value, and it's Nick Madrigal. And Nick Madrigal does not get on base and never slugs. So you can't tell me. I have no idea why the guy's on the team at all anyway, but you can't tell me that the Cubs really value that if they just keep him around. Because he doesn't do either, and he's never going to do either because he's never done either. It's not a slump in your 5th year in baseball when you've just never done it. He's just never going to do it. He's
not a glue guy. He binds the good players together.
I mean, maybe he's inexpensive to ship. I don't know. Do they pay? I mean, I just know from like the Curb Your Enthusiasm where they went to the destination wedding and Larry had to get everybody's weight for the pilot because otherwise the plane would be unbalanced and nobody would tell Larry their weight. And Larry was wildly off with his guests and they had to land like halfway because they were going to run out of fuel and they had to jettison everybody's luggage.
Now I got to watch this.
And then they all got back on the plane. Well, the best part of that, I'm going to give it away because it's funny. It doesn't make it less funny. While they're in Cancun, I think is where the wedding was, there's like a little like street festival. Yeah. And Larry runs into a guy who is like in The Jerk, who is guessing people's age or weight. So he surreptitiously brings all the people that are going to be on the flight home by the guy, so the guy can guess their weight and give it to Larry, so Larry can have a more accurate number to give to the pilot. It's incredible. And I kind of wonder if the Cubs are like, well, fuel costs are way up. I mean, Madrigal weighs like 11 pounds. Think how much money we save by having at least one of him.
I totally hear what you're saying about what stats teams value and don't, and your story about Boog texting all the executives with the Cubs, who leads them in RBIs. But I always got the feeling, kind of circling back to your Madrigal question, why is he here, that they're afraid. They don't really believe in RBIs, but they're also afraid to dismiss them entirely. And that might have something to do with, that can sort of explain it while not knowing who leads them in RBIs. I wonder if they kind of are still afraid to not count it for something. And with Madrigal, I don't know if it's grit or glue or something, but it's like, well, you can't have 26 guys on your team that all do something good. So you might as well have one or two that we don't really know what they do, but maybe they have a nice smile. And it takes a lot of stuff like that to get through a 6-month season. So that's why he's around. Maybe it's that.
Yeah, is it like, he never complains when he doesn't play.
Right.
And that helps the clubhouse.
That's a good example. That's a good example right there.
I mean, there are college basketball coaches that would, they really only wanted, at the most, they wanted 5 really good players, because if you had 6 and 7, those two guys were always bitching about not playing enough. The problem was, and if you only had 5 D1 caliber players, so nobody would complain, 2 of them get hurt, and you're finishing in 8th place, because now you got a bunch of suburban white kids that get the ball stolen away from them every time they touch it. It's like, oh shit, well that didn't work. The thing, Cub fans don't like him, so the fact I harp on it does. Nobody's gotten super impatient with me. Stop complaining about Nick Madrigal. I'm just going to do it till he's gone, because Marquis, I feel like I'm counter-programming Marquis. Mm-hmm. Marquis is constantly telling you how valuable he is and what a good defensive third baseman is when he's not, and all this stuff. We've already talked about all that. But one thing I found really damning was the thing they would say about him, the Marquis guys would say about him, and the Cubs would say about him publicly was, he hits fastballs so well. That's a skill that, even if he's not going to hit a lot of doubles, at least when we face a guy with a big fastball, we know we can put Nick in and he's going to put the bat on the ball, even though we might get into 4 double plays in one game. Well, then you fast forward to Saturday with Paul Skenes, and Dansby Swanson is on the injured list, so they need a second baseman. And it's going to be Nick Madrigal, right? Nope. It was Miles Mastrobuoni. Mm. And Miles had 3 hits, because what does Miles do? Miles hits elevated fastballs really well. It's the only thing he hits. It's okay, if you've got him, why do you need the other guy then?
Right.
If there was ever a Nick Madrigal game, it was Saturday. And Craig Counsell, when he made out the lineup, is like, well, no, Mastrobuoni's a lot better solution here than the little guy is. What do you need the little guy?
In some ways, the White Sox really lucked out, because they were able to convince the Cubs to take Madrigal. Because I think when you have a guy like that, and I know the Cubs didn't pick him, but when you have a dude, was he the 4th player in the draft?
Yes.
When you pick somebody that high, you're kind of married to them. It's like, well, we have to see this out, because we've invested our egos. I mean, really, basically, that's it, in making sure that this guy succeeds. And we're going to exhaust those opportunities. And maybe it also gets back to, well, we might have people to replace him, but we're not talking about a huge difference in talent between X and Nick Madrigal, so we're going to stay with Nick. And the Cubs, it's okay that they traded Kimbrel for him. I don't think they would have anything, you cut Madrigal, you DFA'd him, he was the 4th pick in the draft. I think there's one team of separation between that embarrassment and the Cubs. The White Sox, I could see them hanging on to Nick Madrigal had they not traded him for that reason. The Cubs, they don't have to kowtow to that history. They can just let him go. So
what it clearly shows is that the White Sox realize right away he can't really play.
Right.
And he had good numbers for them. He had, they were limited and they were going in the wrong direction. He had 340 in his little cameo his first year. He had 317 the second year, but his numbers were starting to go bad, and then he tore his hamstring like off the bone. The Cubs, there's so many things wrong with the trade. The Cubs traded for him when he was on the 60-day injury list. Don't do that. You have to get an exemption to do that. You have to get like permission from the baseball to do.
Right.
I think the White Sox have to get it. They have to get permission to trade a guy on the injured list. The White Sox, who were they were playing for the playoffs that year. In fact, they made the playoffs that year. Didn't have anybody to replace him, and long term, I didn't care. Like, nope, that's fine. We don't care. We don't need him.
They still haven't really replaced him.
No, and they still don't see. And here, if you're Jed, if you're agonizing over the decision whether to send Nick Madrigal to Iowa or not, call the White Sox and offer him back and see if they will give you anything for him. And when they won't, that should be the thing that realizes, okay, that's the only other team in baseball that thought he was any damn good. They don't want him back. We don't want him. The other thing that we've made fun of on the other podcast a lot is that the Cubs that year that Nick Madrigal went first took Nico Hoerner 20th, I think. Nico is like the actual good version of Nick Madrigal.
If you could get Nick Madrigal to be good, this is what it'd be.
He does everything that Nick supposedly does, only he's an adult-sized player. Nick he's little. He's not very strong. He's also not very fast for a small guy. One of my favorite things, I think we talked about this, is on the StatCast. StatCast admitted that short guys are overvalued on their metric because what they do is they literally point like radar at a certain part of the first base line. And because little guys' legs, they take so many more steps, the radar thinks they're going faster than they are. So his speed isn't really.
Where did you see that?
I saw it. I need to find it because I loved it. It was one of my favorite anecdotes ever. It's not by a lot, but it can be the difference between being like in the 20th percentile and the 50th percentile, where you look like an average runner. Like, well, he's really not. But it doesn't matter because when he gets on base, he's a terrible base runner. He's situationally unaware. And he's not a good defensive player at second, which is really the only position you could ever get away with playing him at. He's never going to hit well enough to DH. There's just no reason for it. But now you got Nico, who you picked later. You made the better pick by far. In fact, Nico, one of the 2 or 3 best picks in that whole first round.
Right.
And he does all the stuff. He doesn't strike out. He's a great defensive second base. He might be the best defensive second baseman. And one of the things that Nico helped the Cubs with last year and will forever is one of the benefits of getting Dansby Swanson was you got a really good defensive shortstop. But you moved Nico to second the year that the rules changed, the shift rules changed. And now you had a second baseman who could actually cover all that ground that you were shifting other guys over to try to handle. And so it's a big advantage for the Cubs to have Nico at second because he gets to balls that most other second basemen don't. And it just amazes me that the same team can watch the two guys both play on the same team and be like, well, thank God we got 2 of those. Like, you don't. You have 1 of those. And then you got whatever this other thing is.
Yeah, I don't know how they, with Hoerner in the fold, why they did that in the first place, that deal. So.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it, well, I think I do. And this is a very Cub thing. This goes back to the most glaring, and not the most glaring, but the most memorable version of this it was the story that Dave Kaplan loves to tell because he was there when it happened. When in 2008, when the Cubs had that really good team and they crapped out in the playoffs against the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Ryan Dempster watched 7 guys in game 1, gave up a grand slam to James Loney, and then they lost game 2 and they went out, and then Kerry destroyed a water cooler and a water fountain at Dodger Stadium and flooded the clubhouse. After game 3, everybody's back at the team hotel, and Lou Piniella and Jim Hendry and Gary Hughes and other guys are drinking at the hotel bar. And Cap is there, and he's like hanging out listening to them. And Lou is complaining about how right-handed the team was and how like his best left-handed hitter was Kosuke, and Kosuke just wasn't that good, and they were going to have to find a real left-handed bat if they were going to be any good in 2009. And while the 2008 Cubs, Sam Zell was owning it was this brief time owning the Tribune and therefore the team, had basically told John McDonough to spend a bunch of money. Let's get this team good so it'll help drive up the price of the franchise. That had ended. And now Jim didn't have any money to work with. So he traded a guy who didn't have a great MLB career, he had a good MLB career, but he played really well in his 2 years with the Cubs, Mark DeRosa.
Mm-hmm.
And he traded him to clear some money so that he could go sign Milton Bradley to play right field. And that whole thing was, we need a left-handed bat. Hey, this guy's available. We can trade Carlos Silva for him. Yeah, well, no, or no, like I said, to trade Carlos to get rid of him. They just signed him as a free agent. He went to dinner with Jim Hendry and charmed him. Jesus. I feel like the Madrigal trade was, so that was an overcorrection. That was the Cubs going, we got to get a left-handed bat at all costs. We'll get it.
Okay.
I feel like the Madrigal one was, our team strikes out too much. We don't make contact. If we just had a guy or two who made a lot of contact, think about how much better this offense would be. Well, look, there's a guy who never strikes out.
Right.
We'll get him. And it didn't work because, yes, he makes a lot of contact. He makes a lot of really soft contact. Baseball Savant has just come out with the bat speed metric.
Right.
And Nick's not on the chart. Not in a, well, I was just telling somebody the story the other day about how when we had a cat who was 19, and I took him to the vet, and we're sitting there waiting for the vet to come in, and there's a chart on the wall. How old is your cat in people years?
Uh-huh.
And it only went to 18. And I said to the cat, who just happened to be named Dave, I said to the cat, Dave, I think you're screwed. You're not even on the chart. Madrigal is not on the chart for bat speed. But he's not on it because he hasn't played enough. But if he was on it, because they rank 200, then 20, he would be 216th. He has, this was a stat I unearthed because I as soon as I thought of it and I looked it up, I'm like, I'll bet Christopher Morel has more barrels because he had a good week last week. I'll bet he has more barrels last week than Nick Madrigal has in his career. I was wrong. Last week, Christopher Morel, 4 barrels.
Right.
In Nick Madrigal's 4 full seasons of the big leagues, 4 barrels.
That's impossible.
He didn't have any 2 years ago. He had 2 1 year, then he had none, then he had 2 last year. He's got none this year.
That doesn't seem possible.
It's possible. We see it. So he doesn't hit the ball hard, and he doesn't swing particularly. He's not going to generate any power with that swing.
Right.
And the guy who's dead last of the qualifiers on that list is a legitimately good hitter, Luis Arraez.
Right.
Who's a career 327 hitter. But while like Giancarlo Stanton is swinging like, I don't know what it is, 96 miles an hour or something, and Christopher Morel swinging 93 miles an hour, Luis 62 miles an hour. And so on the podcast last week, I asked Oleg and Praz, I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask you the same question. I said, all right, since all he does is, since his value is entirely wrapped up in his batting average, what does Nick have to hit to be worthy of a big league roster spot?
Well, he doesn't run either.
Right.
330.
Yeah. I said 320. And then I looked up Arraez in 327. I thought, okay, it's 327.
Right.
And Arraez is a better, like Arraez hits doubles. Nick doesn't do that. Now, Luis is a terrible defensive player.
He is.
His best defensive position is first base. And he's not really good there, but he can't play him at first. I mean, I know did the Twins play him at first 2 years ago?
Sometimes, yeah. Marlins a little bit too.
Yeah, and he played a lot of second for the Marlins this year, and he was terrible. He was -7 outs above average. He was 7 outs below average.
That's also impossible.
Which is why he's DHing for the Padres, which is also terrible. Like, that guy should not be your DH. So that's right. And so Nick this year's hitting 196. He's got a lot of hits to get to. That was the other thing I thought was funny. So Mastroboni has the 3 hits in the Skenes game, 2 of them against Skenes, were his entire season total. He'd been 0 for 14 coming into the game. And he spent a lot of time in Iowa. He now has 8 fewer hits on the season than Nick Madrigal does, who's been up the entire year. So that's the impact that he's had. Yeah, you could remember if we talked about this, and I don't think we did because I think it happened after we recorded last time. But one of a former Cub suffered a pretty bad injury.
Yes.
And I explained this on the pod last week. I just want to say because it befuddled me. So I'm watching a Cub game and I look on Twitter and people are like, oh, Wilson Contreras got hurt. And there's a clip. So I watched the clip and it's Chip Carey and Brad Thompson. And it starts in a weird spot. It starts with Wilson rolling around on the ground holding his arm. And so you hear them say he got hit on the backswing by J.D. Martinez. And it's like, gee, how does that even happen?
Right.
And then when they finally show the replay, realize he didn't get hit on the backswing. He got hit on the swing.
On the swing.
Which is really ridiculous that
Yes.
could happen. And the reason that it happened is that the Cardinals have been upset at Wilson for not stealing enough low strikes for their pitching staff, to the point where they now have him catching with a knee on the ground to try to get lower. And now then they had scooted him towards the plate.
Right.
And John Boy had showed progressively from his last year with the Cubs to last year to this year how much closer to the batter Wilson has been getting.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where he basically, when he sticks his glove out, he's basically sticking out over the plate now. Which is how a 6'4" hitter can hit you on the swing, not even on the backswing.
Right.
So my question for you is just, what the hell are the Cardinals doing?
Well, I mean, not in their defense, but it is kind of a league-wide thing that the incidences of, I mean, not too many people have been hit on the swing, but usually it's a backswing, but catcher's interferences have been going up sharply. And there is no line, there is no rule about like where you can sit as long as you don't interfere, you know? So I think you need to, the first thing they should do is make a box, a catcher's box. It's more of if fans notice when you go to a game, it's an open box. The catcher is free to a certain extent to go back and forth. I think the first thing they need to do is give them a line where they are safe. And so they are safe from, I don't want to say unscrupulous, but teams kind of throwing safety out the window and just saying, yeah, stick it out a little bit more. We need those strikes to protect the catchers. So if I were the players union, that's what I'd be doing, saying we need a line there.
Would would bringing in the automated strike zone, assuming they had one that worked, would alleviate all of this, right?
Eventually,
because the catcher could sit back even farther than normal, because it doesn't really matter where he catches it anymore. It's where it crosses wherever the little sensors are pointed.
Right. I don't even know. I don't know. It would. I don't think that. I think Major League Baseball they seem to be trending toward the challenge system. Yeah. So it wouldn't be, framing would still be functional in that system, that, it would have to be full-time robot ump for the framing to be irrelevant anymore.
Right. They use the appeal one now where? AA?
I thought it was triple
A. But... and when you see it in action, I don't know how well it works yet, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, a batter is convinced or a pitcher is convinced that they blew the call. They do the challenge. And then it's the Hawkeye thing from tennis.
Right.
In fact, I think it's probably the exact same thing. And then you just look at and then everybody stops and everybody watches it on the Jumbotron and the crowd oohs and ahs.
Right.
And everybody, I know in tennis, it took like 3 tournaments and everybody just accepts that it's right.
Right.
Like nobody complains about, Hawkeye fucked me. They, except on MASH. Hot Lips Houlihan complain about that. But
Hot Lips.
Everybody just assumes that thing's right. Kind of like everybody at home, like when we watch a football game and we see the first down line, we're just convinced that if the guy gets the ball over that, it's a first down, even though there's some dude in a truck plotting 2 points on a thing, and hopefully he's right. And it's not official, but this is official.
I will say, now, it's not that I watch it closely or even understand the arguments, but my friends who are into soccer, there's a lot of them who do not like VAR.
No.
I think that's what it's called.
No.
And
the VAR one is literally the one everybody bitches about. The one that's the one that nobody complains about. And, I shouldn't say nobody, it's soccer. Somebody will complain about it. The sensors on the goal that determine whether a ball, because the whole ball has to be in or the whole ball has to be out in soccer. Whether it's a goal or not, people really don't dispute that. The one that everybody has no faith in is the offsides.
Offsides, yeah.
And that's because it is manual. It's just like the first down line on TV. The VAR technician is the one who plots it to draw the line.
Right.
So there is a human, like, he or she can just be wrong. And so people don't have as much faith. Plus in soccer, there's the nuance of, all right, when exactly did the ball get kicked so that we freeze it and then we draw the line? There's,
right.
Hopefully in baseball, there would be the idea that I think the issue with it is simply correctly sizing the strike zone per hitter.
Right. There's a three-dimensional
what the dispute is. Not whether or not
three-dimensional factor to the baseball strike zone that with the tennis, you can see, well, is the ball, I know the ball's three-dimensional, but did it hit on the line? Was it over? It's a little more complicated.
Yeah, you line the sensors up.
Ball on a line.
Right, you line the sensors up with the lines on the court, and then you just let it go. Where in baseball, somebody's got to decide where everybody's strike zone is going to change every batter.
So I feel like, and getting back to your original question, would the ABS system eliminate injuries greatly reduce catcher's interference? I think the technology needs to take another step forward, and people need to there needs to be something in 3 dimensions that will change the strike zone per person that's accurate. And I think we're not there yet. But in the meantime, put a line and make it so the catchers are not actually in the plane of the swing.
Yeah, because it's a minimum 8-week injury for Wilson.
Right.
He legitimately just broke his forearm.
Right.
Ugh, that's no fun. But even if it's not going to save our catchers, I would like them to bring in the challenge system, because I think it looks like it's fun, and it'll screw the Cubs at the worst possible point. And still, I'll still think it's fun to have the challenges. And then it's another thing to complain about your manager for is that he wasted the challenges too early in the game, and they give him a little red flag to throw out on the field. That'll be fun.
One thing about Skenes, I think it was Skenes, I think he was like perfect in his challenges down at AAA. I think he never, I don't know if he never got, at some point this season, he was on a streak. He's 15 challenges and he was right every time. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, well, so there has to be communication then between the dugout and the player, right? Because you can't just have, you only get a certain number. You can't just have your starting pitcher blow all 3 of your challenges in the first inning because he's begging for strikes. At the same time, he's going to have a better idea than the manager. So you're almost going to have to look at the manager, and the manager can give him he can do the earmuffs, and they can challenge it. The other weird thing, Counsell doesn't do the earmuff thing.
I had noticed.
He's pulling a shade or some weird. It's like, what is? I just don't get what it. The earmuffs was basically make the umps put the headsets on, or they just really liked old school and they want to swear. I don't understand what I'm doing a thing on. I
thought maybe you were doing like a Top Gun, the guy on deck with the airplane kind of thing.
Basically.
Over there by the baggage loader.
I don't get it. Now that's the kind of thing we need to hear. They do these horribly stilted interviews with Counsell in the dugout once a week. That's what I want Boog to ask him. What the hell does that mean? What is that the signal for?
That's a great name for a podcast. Horribly stilted.
Yeah.
I like that. I might steal that. Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear it.
All right. Well, good. We solved a lot of problems. Cade Horton's coming up to the Cubs. I give him till the All-Star break to put the challenge system in. We're releasing Nick Madrigal into the wild. Paul Skenes gets to pitch as many innings as he wants. I'm going to draw a catcher's box to save our catchers. The Giants need that because they lost both their catchers. On Tom Murphy and then their good one, Patrick Bailey. On back-to-back days.
Right.
Murphy gets hurt. Bailey gets hit in the head with a backswing, I think. Or at least he took a foul ball off the mask. He went on the concussion thing. They bring up Blake Sable. And Bailey's back, but he's day-to-day with some other injury now. And I watched a little bit of Dodgers Giants. The Giants had a 3-1 lead when I started watching. And in back-to-back innings, Sable had wild pitches that any real catcher would have stopped. That both led to runs that eventually tied the game up, and the Giants lost in extra innings. Talk about bad timing for the Giants. So they spent the whole spring trying to trade their former number one. I think, was Joey Bart like the second overall pick?
I don't remember, but it was really
very high.
Yes.
And nobody would take him. So then they put him on the roster to start the season. We're just waiting for a catcher to get hurt so they could trade him. And then they realized their own roster was, carrying 3 catchers when you only have 4 bench guys is pretty tough.
Right. And
they finally just had to DFA him. He ended up getting traded for cash or whatever to the Pirates. And oh, it's okay. We got 2 good catchers. And then 3 weeks later, both catchers are out. And the Giants have so many injuries that they're promoting guys from Class A to Triple A just to fill the Triple A roster out.
Oh, geez.
And it's just a complete mess over there. Anyway, that's a problem we'll let Cole Kuiper and Alex Pavlovich fix the Giants on their podcast. I don't have time to fix them on this one. But anyway, thanks, Dave. It's a lot of fun.
As always, Andy, thank you. I'll see you next time.
Many of us have herpes.
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. Got to congratulate the Dolan family.